Sauron's evil eye in The Lord of the Rings is an idea that J.R.R. Tolkien got from Irish mythology. Now you might say to yourself, Steph, you narcissist, stop trying to make Ireland the centre of the universe. But this is actually true. Tolkien travelled to the west of Ireland when he was a younger man, when he was doing all the background research that would later turn into Lord of the Rings. You see, in the far west of Ireland was the very fringes of Europe, where the old pagan myths had actually been maintained quite well through oral traditions. And while he was out there, he kept on coming across a story of a character called Balor of the Evil Eye. And the story goes that Balor lived far out in the Atlantic Ocean on an island, in a tall tower that was made of metal and steel and glass and mirrors. And one particular trait that Balor had is that his eye had a death stare, and he needed to lift up his eyelid because it was damaged, but when he did, it would unleash this laser beam that would destroy people. And this Balor ruled over a race of beings that were called Fomorians. Now they were something like Orcs or Uruk-hai. And it is these Fomorians that the golden race of Irish gods used to fight against, the Tuatha Dé Danann as we call them. Now imagine this as something like the elves fighting against the orcs in the early days of Lord of the Rings. Now Tolkien commented that these Irish myths were particularly disturbing to him. He felt there was something very off about them, very bizarre and weird. Now, with all that being said, let us speculate a little bit. I have often wondered if this is the story of Atlantis. Is this an echoed and faded memory of that grand empire that existed out in the Atlantic Ocean? You see, Plato noted that Atlantis was a sea power that existed in this region that was far out west of the Mediterranean. And it behaved like a grand hegemonic power. And Plato described how it got arrogant, it started to bully everybody around. Atlantis was the world hegemon, very much like Rome once was, or the British Empire, or the American Empire. And it liked to flex its power on its neighbours and show off. And this might explain why the Irish remember this as something negative. I'm sure you've seen across the world how many people perceive the United States today as the Great Satan, as this giant hegemonic sea-bound power with its great aircraft carriers that is decadent and employs these large slave armies, these mercenary armies, and sends them to your country to go and eviscerate your population and ruin you. And so is this the condition that Atlantis was in when this golden race of elves showed up in Ireland? Was Atlantis projecting its power all across Western Europe, Ireland being one of its colonies, and it had all these Fomorians, this hodgepodge of slaves and mercenaries like that you see at the end of Rome, like you see in the United States now, that were these pawns that the great arrogant Satan of Atlantis used to project its will. And think about this idea of the evil eye, the vision, the tall tower of Balor that projects its ferocious beam and death rays upon you. How would this relate to this analogy and metaphor? Well, think about what happens when this evil eye on top of this tall tower pays attention to you, looks at you. It is able to drag its Fomorian armies, all of its orcs and its most horrible creatures to come and get you. The second the tower, the great Satan, perceives you and understands you, you're in trouble. If it can realize that you're one of its enemies, you're something it wants to kill, it can attract all these monsters to come chase after you, which is its pawn army. So it seems like Sauron or Balor, this tall towered evil eye, is sort of like the state, the endgame monstrous state with this capacity to declare enemies of the state. And think about it in modern terms. If the people in the tall tower of the Congress in America, or Hillary Clinton, or the deep state decides that, you, Osama bin Laden, are an enemy of the American state, you're done, man. You're cooked. And there's no amount of American GIs or Marines that you can kill that will stop them. They will keep coming for you because you've been categorized by the evil eye, and they will just fly all across the world and hunt you down. And this is why this symbol is wrapped up with so much malice and danger. If the evil eye turns its attention to you and puts its death stare upon you, your villages will be leveled. All your friends and families will be bombed into obliteration. An endless stream of Fomorians will land upon your shores and butcher everything that you know and love. And so if you want to understand the tone of Irish myth, these golden elves, the Tuatha Dé Danann, arrived in this situation where Fomorians and Atlantis ruled the land, and this giant evil eye was at the zenith of its power, but also decadent, corrupt, arrogant, and evil. and the golden race of elves were fighting to reclaim the land and establish a realm of honour and virtue against all odds.